special thanks, Andy and Pavel, to both of you for joining us. And of course, a hearty welcome to everyone tuning in. I needn't elaborate. You all know what I know. We're living in troubled times, and anti-Semitism is part of that trouble. Unfortunately, it's showing up all over the place, including in the sports world. What we're going to look at today in a very careful and enlightening way is German soccer, which is an especially interesting case, as you'll soon hear. Does it include some anti-Jewish hostility? Yes, it does. But since October 7th, it's taken, in certain respects, a turn that's also quite positive. Our speakers will spell that out for us. Just a word or two about both of them. Andrei Markovits is now Professor Emeritus at the University of Michigan. He recently wrapped up a career of some 5 decades teaching at major institutions in this country, Germany, Austria, and elsewhere. He's a formidable scholar, focusing on all kinds of important issues: trade unions, democracy, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, and the like. The author of numerous books and countless articles. He has a book on soccer published by Princeton University Press, but one book that I myself have learned a great deal from is this one, Uncouth Nation, Why Europe Dislikes America. I heartily recommend it to all of you who are looking to learn more about the links between anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and the like. Not long ago, Andy also published his memoir, an especially fascinating story, which I likewise recommend. Its title is The Passport as Home. So, Andy, special thanks to you for all you've done over many, many years. And Pavel, to you, to all you're going to be doing over many, many years, I'm sure. Pavel did his PhD at Michigan in German studies. He also has a degree in Jewish studies from Michigan. And of course, during his time there, he worked closely and under the supervision of his professor Markovits. He now serves as a research associate and lecturer at Heidelberg University in Germany. But I learned he's also been doing some teaching in Sweden as well. One of his areas, which not many of us know as much about as we should, involves anti-Gypsyism, and he ties that in to his studies of anti-Semitism as well. He's a keen observer of soccer, and his book on Jews, anti-Semitism, and soccer will appear next year, I'm proud to say, with Indiana University Press. But enough from me. I now turn over to our 2 guests. Andy, how about if we begin with you?
Thank you very much, dear Alvin. It's really a great pleasure and also a major honor for me to, and Pavel, for us to be here and to present our research on this topic. Also, thank you, Günther, for your expert managing all of this and also to getting to know you. I'll speak a few words just about introducing this and then have Pavel do the entire gig. There are 2 origins to this event. One is this summer I was for the 2nd time a Fußballprofessor, literally a soccer professor at the Technical University in Dortmund, and which I did the first time in 2006 and now this summer again. And it was a great honor for me to do this, did lectures on sports and soccer. And I got to know the president of the university, or the rector of the university, quite well. And at one point, he gave me a very special scarf. I hope you can see this. This is a Borussia Dortmund fan club scarf of its Israeli club. In other words, the Israeli Borussia Dortmund fans, a very special scarf for me. Even though I'm not a particularly rabid Borussia Dortmund fan, but I think the scarf bespoke something important. And it also bespoke something that the rector of the university really thought it was very important to give to me in these days of obvious trouble. But also what really piqued our interest, and I always, of course, say this in a plural because it was with my dear friend Pavel, former student, now colleague, where we wanted to actually look at something which was kind of unique or interesting. We were puzzled and attracted by the fact to explain and learn why a world in which anti-Semitism and resentment was very much part of its very being, namely of being a soccer fan, in which sports, as Heisinger, the great Dutch sociologist, teaches us, is by definition agonistic, if not antagonistic. It's A versus B. And in that context, very quickly, there's all kinds of nasty stuff that always appears, and none more so than in the world of European football, for reasons I can't go into, as opposed to, for example, rugby and so on. But in this world in which this agonism exists, in which anti-Semitism plays a very important and central role, suddenly we saw something very interesting. Namely, as of October 7th, a fascinating expression of solidarity with Israel, with the plight of the hostages, with an empathy that really just threw Pavel and me for a loop. And because it's not in the context in which you expect this. And needless to say, by the way, these German clubs behaved a lot better than our fancy universities, but that's a whole different topic, which I'm not going to go into. So basically what you will hear now is our attempt to explain this interesting conundrum. And thereby I'd like to hand over to Pavel, who will now take over the talk. Pavel, please.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Gunther and Alvin. It's a great pleasure to be here, and also thank you and others of your staff members for the great work you did with the paper that just was published today and that we're presenting today with the same title. I'm going to share my screen now and hope it works. Gunther, can you let me know if this looks good? Perfect, okay. So taking up on what Andy just said about what puzzled us, what interested us, what stood out to us, this paper and this talk as well is structured in 3 different parts that are trying to create a nuanced image or a nuanced analysis of what's going on in the world of German soccer. So the first question is, why is soccer something that we call an opportunity structure for not only hatred and resentment, but also for anti-Semitism historically, but still today. So we have a sport that is hegemonic, that is very important, that is everybody's talking about it, and that is so emotionally charged and loaded that anti-Semitism can kind of flourish there. So the second part of the paper then is to look, okay, we have this kind of structure where anti-Semitism can evolve, can flourish. What forms of anti-Semitism are there? How does anti-Semitism appear, manifest? What do we observe? And then the third part is, I think this is really where this paper is new, and what Andy said stood out to us is the question of the situation around and after October 7 and how German soccer responded and why. And I'm trying to make it engaging, showing you a lot of images from the responses to October 7 in German soccer, but also go a bit into the details about how specifically over the last 2 or 3 decades various people, institutions, actors, specifically actually soccer fans in the beginning, created a situation where this solidarity, actually, if we look closer, is not that surprising as it may be at first glance. So to understand the moment of October 7 in German soccer, we just have to go back a few weeks before that and to an event that was celebrated all over Germany, newspapers, soccer fans, and so on. The German soccer club TuS Maccabi Berlin, Jewish soccer club, had won in the season before the German local cup, and because of this was allowed and qualified for the most important German national cup, the DFB Pokal, DFB Cup. And so they played in the first round in home game against the Bundesliga club VfL Wolfsburg, which was a big event, and also to many stood out as something as a symbolic event highlighting the Jewish reconstruction of Jewish life post 1945, and also was with hope and many also saw it as a moment of maybe normalization of Jewish life in Germany. This was in August 2023. A few weeks later, just after October 7, the day after, the German Maccabi sports movement announced that it would pause all match play considering the security situation, that based on years and years of knowledge that every time that the situation Israel-Palestine is heated, is in the news, something is happening there, sports players in Germany on the amateur level, on this Maccabi level, they experience it firsthand. People were already calling in at the coaches, at the managers, saying, "Oh, can I still send my child to a match, or should it stay home?" And so they announced that they would pause all match play just like this, just 1 month after the big cup game, which was a huge event. And so the German public was also reminded that the reestablishment of Jewish life that was just celebrated has always been confronted with anti-Semitism, and that there has always been anti-Semitism around, and an anti-Semitic background noise that was all too real for Jews in Germany, who then paused all match play at Maccabi. However, and maybe in response or despite this feeling of intimidation and anticipation, quickly after Maccabi Berlin made another declaration saying that, quote, "as a multicultural team that also brings together Muslims and Jews, they're not just Jews playing in these Jewish clubs, we absolutely want to continue playing and not let ourselves be defeated." So they started playing again with increased security. And so these reactions by the Maccabi sport movement show how Jews in Germany are both aware of the permanent anti-Semitic background noise in the context of soccer, but at the same time showing how sports offers an important platform for Jewish self-assertion, for taking a stand against anti-Semitism and discrimination. So this is kind of the October 7 moment in Germany for the Jewish clubs, and then we have responses all over the world, also in soccer. To give just one example that is significantly different, this is also on October 7 in the afternoon. Celtic Glasgow is playing a home game in Glasgow, and they produced banners on the same day of the attack, Free Palestine, victory to the resistance, and showing it together with these Palestinian flags. Yet again, the fans in Germany, completely different display from others in Europe, banners like "Bring them home," and so on. There was a lot of solidarity with the hostages, as Andy already said. And so we have, in the context of German soccer, a diverse and ambiguous field for Jews, where anti-Semitism persists, but also offers a space for belonging and solidarity. So the first part, as I said, is about anti-Semitism as a form of tradition and opportunity structure in soccer. And then I go on to talk a bit about the forms of anti-Semitism, and again, come back to the October 7 situation. So soccer, this field is one that has in its core a binary structure, dual structure of us against them, we against the other, home team against opponent. There's something like a home field advantage that comes into play if you boo enough or are you mean enough to the away players, then is calling this home field advantage. We have a stadium architecture that is split. The pitch has two halves. There are two warm-up zones. The home and visiting fan areas in German soccer are separated. And in this context of we against the other, it may be the case that in some situations, people also start to call the other kind of with reference to a third other, to a minority, in order to discriminate against them and make this home field advantage even more powerful, or to use an opportunity to express anti-Semitism or other forms of ressentiment. So we have this binary structure. We have also a context in which, and I apologize for this heavy image, but I think it was an image which fans of my fellow club Werder Bremen in Germany enjoyed a lot and actually celebrated a lot, where the goalkeeper of Werder Bremen kicked a player of its main rival from Hamburg in the face during a game, and they created stickers of this and put them around the city. So winning is everything, all means necessary. There's high emotional involvement, investment in the game, and so we have an arena, a context in which it is, as long as the emotional investment is high enough, completely legitimate to be unfair and sometimes even to hate and discriminate against others. This is not always the case, but it can be the case. And then soccer is extremely important in Germany. It is, as Andy has argued throughout his work on soccer and popular culture, it is hegemonic, not because people do it, because people play it, but most importantly, because it is what people breathe, read, discuss, analyze, compare, historicize, talk about, the break at work, in the bakery store, on the train. It's all over the place. And so, in other words, soccer is important because it is part of the everyday life, not just on the weekends when the games are played, but part of the everyday life of fans. It is omnipresent in the public sphere, yet at the same time, soccer is extremely public. 40,000 people, 80,000 people in the stadium, thousands of people like here in this image, watching it publicly together. But at the same time, it offers a certain anonymity. So, for instance, if I go into a stadium and someone is shouting something and I look over the shoulder, oh, where did this come from? And then someone else is shouting someone and I have no idea, but everybody or many people have heard what was said. So in this crowd, one can be kind of part of a larger collective, of an elective that is emotionally invested, winning is everything, but also be anonymous at the same time to a certain degree. And this collective identity that is created here is particularly local. Soccer clubs is a place where people have a close connection, and these clubs are a significant marker of a person's very identity, as clubs are perceived as an extension of the self. They are seen as part of oneself, of one's emotional well-being, and they are seen as traditional and locally rooted. They represent the hometown, the home quarter, the home area, the colors that one wants to be represented. And in the framework of anti-Semitism, and here we can see what we mean by opportunity structure, the object of hatred is constituted in the opposite to local tradition. In anti-Semitism, Jews are seen as global, cosmopolitan, modern, in other words, everything that an authentic soccer club is not supposed to be. So the norms and values of hegemonic soccer provide a field in which anti-Semitism can exist and even flourish, even in a contemporary liberal democracy. Over the last years, more and more money got into soccer, TV contracts got more and more attractive. And so we have a situation in Germany where since the 1990s, the gap between the most wealthy, the most rich clubs and the less endowed clubs has widened to a degree that FC Bayern Munich has won in the last, 12 years, 11 championships. So there are little surprises and less teams who can create their brightness, their honor, their identity, if you wish, built on successes, maybe in the past, but not in the present. And so this is also a situation in which the identity of fans is changing or has changed over the last years. So while the clubs that have most benefited from what we've called in the article also the gentrification of soccer, this process of commodification, of commercialization in recent decades, many supporters now are increasingly defining their fanhood in terms of other values, such as authenticity, based on preferences such as being an underdog, having a long and rooted history. Most importantly, however, not being commercial. And here again, we have characteristics that are denied to Jews in anti-Semitism. So soccer continues to be an opportunity structure where anti-Semitism may show up, because soccer is also a form of emotional discharge resulting from this tension of striving for success. Again, winning is everything, yet at the same time, it's no longer possible in the same way it was maybe 20, 30 years ago. And so the longing for authenticity and the striving for success is creating an emotional tension where anti-Semitism offers an opportunity to discharge this tension that is built up. So the combination of tribalism or localism driven by raw emotions is creating an arena that is difficult to navigate for Jews and other minorities, and in which different forms of anti-Semitism has flourished and still persist. And now I'm coming to the second part, how does anti-Semitism manifest in German soccer today? And in a book that I published 2021, I already suggested a typology of 5 forms of anti-Semitism that we also discuss in our article. And the first of these 5 forms is far-right anti-Semitism, basically a form of anti-Semitism that has openly and proudly employed Nazi terminology and phrases. For instance, in the 1980s, in German soccer, there have been fan groups, hooligan groups, who called themselves, for instance, Zyklon B, right after the gas used by the Nazis to exterminate Jews during the Holocaust. Striking was the chant or phrase that we see here on the scarf, a very different scarf from the one Andy presented earlier. German, defend yourselves, don't go to St. Pauli, fuck St. Pauli is what's written on it. And here on the right, we have a image from Nazi Germany, and this is echoed by this scarf that was created during the 1990s to target, to attack the FC St. Pauli, a club that arguably is among Germany's most socially progressive and inclusive soccer clubs, or not arguably, it is. And it was also the first club where fans started to organize and to kick neo-Nazis out of their stadium. So St. Pauli was not always the left-leaning, progressive, socially engaged club that many people know today, but it also has a past, like all other German clubs, basically, where hooliganism and neo-Nazism were part of the fan culture. And St. Pauli was the first club to organize against it and kick them out. The fan base did this. And so hooligans and neo-Nazis from other clubs since then have a very big hatred against the club from Hamburg. There are other examples of far-right anti-Semitism, but I leave it here, and we can also discuss all of this more in the Q&A. What's important, however, is that far-right anti-Semitism is not the only form of anti-Semitism, but it is the form that still to a large degree is the one that catches the attention of authorities and media. However, neither are fans nor neo-Nazis the only perpetrators of anti-Semitism in German football. So there's far-right anti-Semitism. Then there is classic anti-Semitism, which we describe as an anti-Semitism in which Jews are explicitly mentioned directly, and they are associated with typically anti-Semitic stereotypes, with money, with capital, with globalization, with modernity, and so on. And here the group of perpetrators is not limited to far-right soccer fans. Even, and here again we go back to the 1990s, the former press secretary of the largest soccer association in the world, the Deutscher Fußballbund, the DFB, has expressed anti-Semitic conspiracy theories publicly. Wolfgang Niersbach, the former press secretary, was upset when a protest aroused against the friendly national game between Germany and England that was supposed to take place at Berlin's Olympic Stadium on April 20th, 1994, which is also Adolf Hitler's birthday. Thousands of neo-Nazis from Germany and England had mobilized to Berlin, aiming to celebrate Adolf Hitler's birthday and to attack and hunt foreigners, political opponents, and so on. So it was supposed to be a big neo-Nazi event. However, after public protests, the English soccer organization finally canceled the match. And here we have a poster that mobilized for demonstration against this national friendly on the 20th of April in Berlin. And this, by the way, is also kind of the starting point to what we discussed in the last part of today's presentation, the anti-Semitic work done by German soccer fans. So here, for more or less the first time, German soccer fans organized on a national basis to attack or to oppose neo-Nazis in the context of football. So the game was canceled. However, the press secretary of the German Soccer Association commented, quote, April 20th is not indexed. 80% of the American press are controlled by Jewish hands. Occurrences in Germany are thus observed in seismographic detail. So the notion of an American press that is articulated here that is controlled by a few Jews is a classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. So we have anti-Semitism not only among fans, but in all areas of the game, in the seating area, in the standing area, in the VIP area, in the management boards, and also on the way to the game and back at train stations, in public spaces. So far-right anti-Semitism, classic anti-Semitism, and then third, anti-Semitism manifests as what is often termed secondary anti-Semitism, a form of anti-Semitism characteristic of post-World War II, post-Holocaust European societies. And it includes forms like Holocaust denial, anti-Semitism directed against Israel, or victim blaming. Victim blaming is exactly what Dieter Graumann, the former president of the German Jewish Central Council between 2010 and 2014, encountered when, at this point, he was still quite new in the position, had a meeting with top representatives of the German Soccer Association, DFB. And later in an interview, Graumann remembered about this interview the following, and here again I quote, "When I first talked to high-ranking DFB officials, one of them looked at me with a questioning look and said, 'There's always only trouble with you.' The Jews would, so the statement goes, make trouble by thematizing anti-Semitism in the present and remembering the Germans of the Nazi past." So the moment that the problem, anti-Semitism, becomes a problem is the moment the Jew raises the voice and makes the problem public or brings it to the attention of those responsible for the sport that they are doing. Again, this is about 10, 15 years ago. Now, while far-right standard classical anti-Semitism as well as secondary anti-Semitism exist or can exist independently of the actual or assumed presence of Jews, there's also a strain of anti-Semitism that is directly and openly targeted at Jewish people and institutions, which we discuss as anti-Semitism directed against Maccabi clubs, like in the example at the beginning, or the story about the cup game in the beginning. These Maccabi clubs, which in the first decades of their refounding in 1965, not only served as an athletic outlet for Jews, but also made the Jewish community in Germany more visible, are still the focus of anti-Semitic attacks today. These attacks include visual assaults, such as the painting of swastikas on sport facilities, as well as threats and physical attacks. They are also confronted with secondary anti-Semitism. For example, they are accused of being hypersensitive when they point out anti-Semitic incidents and alert the public to various incidents as exploiting the Holocaust. Fifth is what in this 2021 book, where Andy wrote a wonderful preface, and we discussed this many times, is what I term the anti-Semitic ressentiment against RB Leipzig. RB Leipzig is a club that is often the scapegoat for a perceived term, or maybe important is here that this is quite of a specific and new form of anti-Semitic resentment built on this opportunity structure. So it is a club that was only founded in 2009, and it is the only club that more than half of German soccer so-called ultra groups, the fans who normally support their team at every match, even all the away games, are boycotting RB Leipzig's home field, the Red Bull Arena, because they argue the club is not supposed to exist. It is artificial. It should not be there. So they have all these binary patterns against the clubs. Our club is traditional. They represent modernity. Our club is locally rooted. They are global because they were founded by a company, Red Bull, and not like our club by some people that wanted to play ball. And it is based on the binary of being authentic versus them being not authentic. They are often called the plastic club, for instance. So it is negatively constructed as being inauthentic and has historically, and in many other cases directly, targeted Jewish and Jewish organizations with these labels: modernity, global, artificial. The unique dynamic of this ressentiment against RB Leipzig lies in the fact that it is an anti-Semitism without Jews, and it is also an anti-Semitism without anti-Semites. So here is specific that RB Leipzig is not targeted as Jewish, different than classical anti-Semitism, where Jews are often or always mentioned explicitly. Here it is not. It's never mentioned that the club is Jewish, or even maybe not implied. So it can also function as an anti-Semitism without anti-Semite. All these tension that we discussed, winning, authenticity, identity, localism, they are all kind of expressed, or this tension is kind of let loose when it comes to RB Leipzig, the most hated club in German soccer. Yet one is completely free of any suspicion of anti-Semitism because the club is not called Jewish. Yet what we see in many cases is that RB Leipzig is the personification of the evil of soccer, of the commodification, of the gentrification, of the modernity of soccer. And sometimes this is even expressed in stylized symbols. So on the left, we have the original club symbol RB Leipzig with two Red Bulls. On the right, we then have a graffiti banner that was shown in the stadium where Rasenball Sport, as the club is officially called, because it is not allowed to be called Red Bull in Germany because of sponsor rules, becomes Rattenball, Red Ball, and the Bulls become Reds. Of course, one of the most anti-Semitic used caricatures in the history of anti-Semitism, and they even are kind of eating the very core of the game, the ball, so they are destroying it. and all they want, as we can see on the bottom, is money. And in the background of this banner even is a lot of money. We can see some coins there and some maybe dollar notes or so. So here also the anti-Semitic ressentiment merges with anti-Americanism when it comes to RB Leipzig. So today we have a situation in which open anti-Semitic expressions have been, at least to a certain degree, banned from Bundesliga stadiums, so at least from the upper level stadiums. Yet soccer functions as a field for anti-Semitic ressentiment, adversity, and hatred, and this function of the sport that we discussed in the first part of the paper remains intact. Considering the pervasiveness of anti-Semitism and its causes in soccer, these responses that we discussed to October 7 are to a certain degree surprising, and they also signify important changes in the topography of German soccer. So I'm now coming to the third and final part of the presentation, the responses in German soccer to October 7. First of all, it's important to note that anti-Semitism, as in most or all countries, has been on the rise since October 7. There is a monitoring report by RIAS Berlin, an information center, and between October 7 and November 9, so just within 2 months of 2023, they had documented almost 1,000 anti-Semitic incidents in Germany. So the report concludes that October 7 has created a new reality for many Jews in Germany, and they encounter manifold forms of anti-Semitism. The report also has all kinds of statistics, for instance, on the locations and contexts of these anti-Semitic incidents. And Andy and I were curious to read that only 3 of the almost 1,000 reported incidents happened at stadiums or around sport facilities. So it seems that instead of becoming arenas of hostility and anti-Semitism after October 7, clubs started to issue statements of solidarity, to take a stand against anti-Semitism, to invite October 7 survivors to soccer matches to Germany. And this started within hours as the attack became known. On October 7, the same day of the attack, Werder Bremen was playing a home game against Hoffenheim, and the fans already presented a hastily prepared banner which stated "Stand with Israel." Just 3 days later, on October 7, the club Werder Bremen issued photos on Twitter X about 2 fans that were taken on October 7 to Gaza, Hirsch, Goldberg, Polin, and Inbar, a fan of Maccabi Haifa. They shared this on their social media accounts, explaining that Hirsch, a supporter of Hapoel Jerusalem, last visited a Werder home game in January and now needed immediate medical care, and any information should be sent to a specific address, which they provided. And many more banners and initiatives followed after this day. Maybe this is a good point to also share that I, as a Werder Bremen supporter, before I started writing about soccer and specifically together with anti-Semitism, was more engaged in the context of the club Werder Bremen, and this friendship between Werder Bremen supporters and Hirsch, who is a member of a group called Brigade Malcha of Hapoel Jerusalem, a fan group. There's a friendship that lasts until today, and it started in 2011 when there was a group from Werder Bremen organized by the Social Pedagogical Fan Project. I will talk about this later a bit more. In 2011, visit Israel and many clubs there and fans and for an exchange. And I was actually part of this travel group and visited Jerusalem and the fans of Jerusalem in 2011. So this is where this came from, and also, yeah, maybe a bit of my involvement in this story. So more banners and initiatives followed, and Werder Bremen fans soon had another banner: "Every attack on Jewish life is too many." When it became clear that Maccabi Haifa fan Inbar Haiman was murdered in Hamas captivity in Gaza, some Werder fans created a large choreography in her honor. Here we see her picture and one flame commemorating her. There's one group from Werder Bremen supporters, and they have a friendship with the group of Maccabi Haifa, the fan group, where Inbar Haiman was part of or close to. Then we look at some other stadiums. Fans, supporters of 1. FC Cologne created fan scarves against anti-Semitism, and they issued a funding campaign for an organization that provides emotional support for survivors and relatives of October 7. This is also in a top league. If we go down a little bit, fourth league, Club Chemie Leipzig displayed banners demanding peace for the people of Israel, free Palestine from Hamas, stop terrorism and fascism, freedom for all people. Fans of FC St. Pauli, who have a long-standing friendship with those of Hapoel Tel Aviv, displayed banners such as Hapoel Mishpacha, which means family in Hebrew, always with you. A bit more in the south of Germany, supporters of SC Freiburg responded directly to the rise of anti-Semitism in German society with banners stating, "Germany 2023, houses are marked with a Star of David, synagogues attacked, people stay at home out of fear, never again is now, against all forms of anti-Semitism." And it's not limited to individual clubs or fans. In May 2024, the Deutsche Fußballliga, which is the umbrella organization for all the professional clubs of the first and second league in professional men's soccer in Germany, organized a trip to Israel for Bundesliga and second Bundesliga staff, which involved staff members from fan support, from corporate social responsibility, and from communications. And this group in Israel visited the Hostages Square. They participated in the Holocaust Remembrance Day event at Yad Vashem, and they also met eyewitnesses of the attacks as well as relatives of hostages. Needless to say, probably, that the support for the hostages or for Israel was not unanimous. Controversy arose when German Bundesliga players made social media posts perceived as glorifying the October 7 attack on Israel. One player from Bayern Munich and a player from Mainz 05 faced public debates and criticism after declaring that Palestine will be victorious after October 7 on social media. And so we had a debate there. And in response, the clubs, and I think this is interesting, conducted some kinds of internal reviews with their employees, with the players. And the player of FC Bayern Munich had discussions with the FC Bayern, with the club leadership, later also with Munich's Jewish community, the contract was not terminated, which was strongly criticized by, for instance, the Maccabi Sport Movement's spokesperson, but also from the Central Council of Jews in Germany. Mainz 05, however, also held meetings and discussions with this specific player, but terminated the player's contract after the player repeatedly said that he is standing by his remarks and is not considering them again or taking them back. So the debate arose whether the club's responses were strong enough, yet not about whether anti-Semitism and or public statements supporting these October 7 attacks are acceptable and tolerable. I think this was more or less unanimous, but the way the clubs dealt with these players were strongly criticized and debated. Following months and months of campaigning for the release of the hostages, in the case of Werder Bremen, Hirsch specifically, the devastating news of his death in Gaza in early September 2024 sent shockwaves throughout the club, Werder Bremen. And during the club's next away game, the fans displayed a large flag, Hirsch forever. And even during the next game, the next home game, Werder Bremen supporters colored the stadium in the colors of Hirsch's beloved Hapoel Jerusalem, red and black, and also in the colors of Werder Bremen, green and white. And quoting Hirsch's father at the funeral of Hirsch, where he said, "May your memory be a revolution." And then Shalom, Salam, peace in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. So these various forms of responses and solidarity can be attributed to the efforts of fan organizations and clubs against discrimination, and to decades of specifically of fan activism, and more recently also increasingly proactive stance taken by German soccer authorities, clubs, the league, and so on. And they fostered a particular environment which was enabling this empathy and solidarity. And in the final minutes of this presentation, before coming to the conclusion, I want to talk a little bit about this development from the 1990s to today to understand where this is coming from. So in the late 70s to the mid 1990s, German soccer was not very attractive, low spectator numbers, little TV time, and also groups governing the stadiums, which belong to the hooligan fan culture. Here's a banner again from Bremen. On the banner, you can see written Standarte, which is the name of the main hooligan group in Bremen. And they have been named, or they named themselves after the SS division stationed in Bremen. So directly again here, far right, anti-Semitism, neo-Nazism, glorifying the SS division that was stationed in the city. In the 1990s, a situation where not only far-right symbols and groups, but also violence was a much bigger problem than today. German authorities issued something that was called the National Concept Sport and Security, which had a dual approach. On the one hand, it tried to change the situation through repression against hooliganism by implementing more video surveillance, stadium bans of perpetrators, but also combining it with preventive initiatives in the form of social work with and for fans. At the same time, supporters, and at the time this was a very little minority in German soccer, supporters founded something that was called BAF. At the beginning, the Bündnis Antifaschistischer Fußballfans, Network of Anti-Fascist Soccer Supporters, later renamed to Network of Active Soccer Supporters. And this was a pioneering effort to challenge neo-Nazism and racism and anti-Semitism in the context of soccer. Over time in the 1990s, this new situation in the stadiums also laid the groundwork for new fan groups, the Ultra movement. And here I allowed myself to put in a picture of Hirsch's fan group, Brigade Malcha from Jerusalem, which is similar ultra group to the ones we have in Germany. Fan groups that are more about passionate displays, banners, organized chanting throughout the game, in opposition to or different from these hooligan groups who were about violence. And you can be an ultra fan without being violent, but you cannot be a hooligan without looking for violence. And so there is a big difference. And here Germany is specific. This is different in Italy, Poland, other countries, but in Germany this is a difference. And this ultra movement really since the 1990s has taken over the leading role in the fan cultures. They are often groups of maybe 50 to 500 people, but they are most active, most visible, attending every game, of course, except RB Leipzig. And they are often more centrist, liberal, sometimes even left-wing politically, at least more diverse. This is the 1990s. And then in the 2000s, Germany hosted the World Cup in 2006. And this was a huge year where German soccer also started to do things differently. I'm going to jump over to slides here and show the book cover of this 2006 book by a historian, Nils Havemann, and it was kind of the first long-term research project looking at the history during Nazism of German soccer. The study was immediately criticized, and I think rightly so, for separating politics and soccer and saying these are different spheres. Soccer is not political, and basically tried to stay away from anything politically during Nazism, which is, as we know today, many more studies has been published, has been not the case. However, German soccer started to treat the issue of historical responsibility and political responsibility more seriously, and they also created a prize, Julius Hirsch, named after a Jewish German international who was murdered in Auschwitz. And since the World Cup took place in Germany, they are issuing this prize, awarding this prize every year to initiatives targeting discrimination in the context of soccer, giving it a big media platform, support network. So this is also from the side of the DFB, from the most important organization in German soccer, a big step away from the examples we have seen earlier. A big part of this process, of this journey of German soccer, has been this campaign Nie wieder, never again, which started in 2004, which is a campaign, an initiative that every year around January 27 calls for actions by clubs, fans, and people who relate to these soccer organizations to participate in the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so, for instance, this year, they worked together with an archive and asked fans and people from these clubs to go online and search for names related to these clubs and put something in this online archive, the Arelson archive. Just 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, 2.5 years ago, early 2022, there was a conference organized by an organization that was just founded a few years ago called What Matters. They are helping and supporting soccer organizations to become active against anti-Semitism in the context of sport. There was a joint event hosted in the stadium of Borussia Dortmund by the German Football League, the World Jewish Congress, and the Central Council of Jews in Germany. So there is also new networks, new collaboration, new awareness between these different organizations. And then finally, and this is one of these organizations I went to Israel with in 2011 from Bremen. There are fan projects which are independent of the fans and the clubs. And these are social pedagogical organizations working closely with fan groups, fan organizations, individual fans since the 1990s. And they have organized dozens and dozens of these visits to Israel, but also to memorial sites, for instance, Auschwitz and other concentration and death camps, always tied to stories of members from these soccer clubs, so that the fans have the opportunity to create a bridge from their local history, their localism, their local investment in the club, to the history of the club and members that has been there, that have been excluded from the club, that maybe have even murdered during Nazism. And this builds a bridge, of course, for these fan groups. And this is also unique to Germany. These fan projects do not exist anywhere else. So we have a situation where since 2 or 3 decades, the status quo of German soccer, or of anti-Semitism, discrimination, neo-Nazism in German soccer, has been challenged from 3 angles. First, from the fans, groups like BAF, this network, later some of the ultra groups, and often clubs and league representatives or organizations joined in later. At the same time, however, they had already created this concept, sport and security, which had 2 other angles. The one, repression of deviant fan behavior, modernization of stadiums, new TV contracts were also made at the time. And finally these pedagogical approaches, these fan projects who supported fan groups in maybe finding different solutions to the tension of authenticity and success and so on. So to conclude, we discussed, or our article discusses, why soccer is a specific opportunity structure for hatred and specifically anti-Semitism, and why and how this is still the case. Second, we discussed forms of anti-Semitism, how it manifests in soccer, and that argued that anti-Semitism is far more than far-right anti-Semitism or open expressions by fans, but has many levels and nuances. And finally, we looked at the situation post-October 7 and discussed how German soccer responded and why they did so. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.